right. Well, where do we begin?
It's a hugely momentous day, I think. I think it'll make a lot of people incredibly nervous when they wake up and see the front pages of British troops being sent over potentially onto Ukrainian soil.
Yeah, but he's talking nonsense. He's not going to do that.
There's a degree of posturing, admittedly, and I think it probably contextually comes after very recently we've had, J.D. Vance and Trump basically, if we cut it all down, calling out, EU nations, including Britain, for being kind of weak. And I think Starmer is trying to get ahead of it. I think he wants Germany, I think he wants other EU nations, off the back of that pressure from Trump, to start kind of strengthening and paying our way more. But, I mean, I have to say, I think you've got to be really, really careful with this stuff because, it's been years now. There's been bloodshed, lives lost, and in terms of things looking like an escalation right at the 11th hour, I don't think
it won't be. I mean, I look at this, and here you have, whether we all like it or not, Trump has come to Putin and says, look, the only two people that matter in all of this, when there should be three, there should be Ukraine, obviously, or me and you, right? So we get an agreement between this, and then we'll just get on with things. So whether they achieve that or not, what difference does it make whether France is involved, whether Germany's involved, whether Britain is involved?
Yeah, I think oddly enough, the two things are almost linked. I think the pressure of Trump now being back in the States and back on the scene, what J.D. Vance said last week about the EU and kind of, the weakness that it's showing. I honestly think that, Keir Starmer and other European leaders are feeling that pressure, but I don't think troops on the ground are gonna make the British public feel comfortable whatsoever. But to your point,
what he means, if he was ever to do that, I don't believe a word that comes out of the man's mouth. But what he means is he's talking about people servicing machinery and administrative background people, whatever it is. Nothing. It'll not happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think the real conversation, you saw a lot of ministers talking about it over the weekend on the Sunday political shows, is defence spending. I mean, in terms of like the most acute moment in time since Cold War and all that kind of stuff that's being chucked around at the moment. We are going to ultimately have to raise defence spending, but who's going to pay for that? Once again, that's the British taxpayer, and that might be quite a tough sell. But I think he's far better placed to start kind of narrowing down and rolling the pitch on that, rather than, to your point, chucking around pretty, hot and heavy inflammatory stuff about British troops being sent across.
So the thing is, we haven't got enough troops to send anyway. Right, troops on the ground. You're both going to have views on this. So,
yes.
Where has Starmer come out and said all of this? I mean, it's not iota do I believe this, or will this come about, or he'll wait till war's over and he'll send in a few people to fix trucks or whatever it happens to be.
Well, I mean, so the front page of the Telegraph today.
Where's he said it? When's he said it?
Well, this is obviously coming from the meeting in Munich with the security meeting, and there's an emergency meeting being called for Paris today with all the heads of the European states there, because Russia and America are having their own separate meeting about peacekeeping in Ukraine, so Europe all thinks they should get. And Starmer's come out and said, yes, we are going to be, the front page of the Times, we are going to be the bridge between Europe and America, and we are going to be the peacekeeping. We don't have enough troops to fill Wembley Stadium.
No. Well, how are we going to pay for that?
Well, exactly. This is the other problem. So it's kicking off a row between Rachel Rayner and David Lammy about how we're going to pay for all of this thing. But it's like, the idiocy, the front page of the Telegraph in particular is, I'm going to protect the Ukraine from Russia. It's like,
full of it. Absolutely full of it.
We can't even protect the Kent coast.
Do you believe this, Chris?
No, I mean, I think the thing is, it's peacekeeping. So actually, if the British went in, it will be so far down the road that it wouldn't be what we know right now with the meat grinder and all that sort of stuff. So I think he's saying it's peacekeeping. Certainly, if it was anything more than that, I'd want to know, are your kids going to go in first? I've got a young boy, 17. Are your children going to go in on the front line first? I doubt very much. Look, I mean, since when Maggie went into the Falklands, when I say Maggie, sorry, that's Prime Minister Thatcher. When she went into the Falklands, she got that hero status, and then Blair wanted to do the same with her. Yeah. And my sense is that all of these political leaders think that they've got to be the next commanding officer that takes our troops into another theatre of war.
Could I just be somewhat controversial here? And this is not my view, this is me just saying this. I can see the attraction with the Falklands. You know, that's a British
100%.
interest and
Well,
whatever.
I nearly went
and
there.
that's why it worked for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Blair thing didn't work because no one cared less.
Yeah.
And I put it to you, and however cruel, however awful this is, British people do not care, by and large, what's happening in Ukraine.
I think you're right, and I think J.D. Vance, the Vice President of America, and Elon Musk have both hit the nail on the head. It's like you need to be more worried about the enemy within, and I do agree with that statement. And when we saw over the weekend that 14-year-old boy who lost his life in it was an Islamist attack in Austria, he was knifed, and that was twice in a week in Austria that children have lost their lives in these attacks. We've seen it in this country many times now, and I think J.D. Vance might have been a very controversial speech, but I do think he's got a point that we need to be worried about what's going on in this country now and who we're letting in. Hence my joke that wasn't really a joke by Starmer offering to protect the whole of Ukraine when he can't protect the people of his own country.
Do we need to raise defence spending to at least 2.5%, potentially even more?
Yes, we do. And we were spending around 2.3% on defence over the last few years, and we had a very clear plan for how we would get to 2.5%. The US spends around 3.4%, but we should be very clear, there is a clear threat to us. There is still war in Europe, and we have to make sure that we at home are safe. That is our responsibility as a British government, and we do need to increase that defence spending, particularly if Keir is now saying that we're going to deploy troops abroad. That would mean more investment in our army, whereas at the moment, obviously, we've been focused on our RAF and our Navy because that's what protects our home shores.
Alicia, I put it to you, he's not going to send troops abroad. He's all talk, no action, sounds good, hopes it's going to reflect on him, tough guy, but he's not going to put our troops in any sort of dangerous or endangered situation, is he?
No, I don't think he is. I think this announcement is slightly premature. We are still in the middle of a hot war. We saw that over the last few months, unfortunately, Russia has taken 600 kilometres more territory from Ukraine. What he should be focused on, however, is that defence spending point that you are making. If he is saying that once we get to a deal, and I should make clear that a cessation of hostilities is not the kind of deal we need. We need a deal that ensures Europe is safe from this imperialist terrorist state that we see from Russia. But that means investment in defence spending. So you're absolutely right to say that that should be the heart of the discussion today.
Alicia, there is a very, very good investigative report in The Sun today, and it's about the foreign aid budget. And it is something that we discuss here on the programme, and our viewers and listeners are very anti our foreign aid budget, it has to be said. What we squander around the world. We're talking about how we can't afford to up the defence spending and all sorts of things, and yet we give this money around the world. I mean, the ludicrousness, I could list to you things here, that taxis for Albanian prisoners, £500,000 on that. It just goes on and on and on. It's just ludicrous. What is your view on the foreign aid budget, and how could you defend it?
So I have no time for where we see it being misused. Look, we all sit here putting to put our heads in our hands when we hear things like that. However, there are some aspects of the aid budget that do contribute to our security. I know because when I worked at the Foreign Office, we would use aid budget in order to help us on the ground to make situations more safe, to de-radicalise people, to create a situation where our troops, our people and our interests were safe. That should be the priority. Look, we're seeing it in the US, we're seeing it in the UK. There are always projects that you look at and you go, how did that pass the smell test? And that is about making sure that as much as possible goes through ministers and not just through civil servants. Because when ministers have it land on their plate, I can tell you now, ours looked at them and said, no, that's a complete nonsense. Scrap that immediately.
Yeah.
But we have to make sure that system feeds through properly and the accountability is there. So I don't support scrapping it altogether. I've seen it work. I've seen it make a difference. But yes, without question, I would want to take a big red pen to it, and I would sit there going through what was actually making us safer.
You see, I like the sound of that.